real reality TV aficionados. Welcome to the Giorgio Says podcast. I'm your host, the one and only Giorgio Takanakis, and I'm here serving you the juiciest updates on all your favorite reality shows weekly, as well as the hottest pop culture trends, and even exclusive interviews that will leave you wanting more. This podcast will keep you on the edge of your seat. We definitely need to talk about this. The Giorgio Says podcast starts now. Hi, guys. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
Oh, back at it again. My turn today.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me because this was a little impromptu. I mentioned to you yesterday that I was not aware that Paris was going to drop the entire season 2. I thought it was going to be like last season where it was just 1 week, 1 episode, and we'd have about 8 weeks of Paris in Love. But she said, nope, I want you guys to all have it at once. So thank you, Paris. I do think that it does make a difference when they drop the entire season at once because it kind of lets you kind of get right into the thick of it. But before we get into all of that, how is Caitlin? How are you? What's new? What's fresh from yesterday when we last spoke?
Thank you for asking. Caitlin's hanging in there. We both we went live on my podcast yesterday, and I maybe 30 minutes later, not even, went live again with Erica Cobb from Daily Blast and Come Back with Erica Cobb, and covered Beverly Hills. So, I went ahead and binged Paris in Love all last night and all today. So, it's Paris is fresh on my mind. That's what's on my mind at the moment.
I am so thankful and appreciative that you did that because I'm really excited about this for a number of reasons. And actually, I was talking to my partner last night when we were at dinner because Paris has a special place in my life for a number of reasons, but specifically watching season 2, I think I was just more emotional and triggered because there's, again, the parallels of trauma and how it manifests itself into your life and what's happening. Even though you may have all this great stuff, the trauma still controls that inner voice, the imposter syndrome, and so that was very, I think that was very important for her to also show, because I think for a long time, she was very much protected behind this veil of Paris Hilton, the character that she had created, to basically protect herself. But now I think she's trying to balance that with who Paris is as a human being, a daughter, a wife, a mom, and obviously, a boss ass bitch. Let's be honest. I mean, I was actually blown away that this woman travels as much as she does. Like I was getting anxious for her in some moments because of just, I can't imagine the push-pull that must be, having all these people essentially relying on you, but also you are building this big empire and you're continuing to grow your family and at the same time trying to repair things in your family that you had ignored. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, I do want to mention that if you haven't read the memoir, Paris, the memoir, I strongly suggest, even if you're not a Paris fan, even if you have one view of her that you think is the truth, I guarantee you, if you read this book, you will see a completely different side to her and maybe why some of the things played out the way they did in her career, in her life, in the tabloids, etc. But we're here to talk about Paris in Love season 2. So season 1 was all centered around Paris finding love finally, gearing up to get married to Carter. And, I, being a big Paris Hilton fan, have seen her throughout her lifetime and career be engaged multiple times, okay? Like multiple times. And so this time when she was engaged to Carter, I'm not going to lie, I was like,
let's see if it happens.
We'll see. We'll see. But to all of our like shock, she showed up on the wedding day and she said I do, and they are still together, obviously. And I'm super happy for her because I feel like that was a big point in her life in terms of growing and being able to commit herself to someone else and be vulnerable. So that was nice. But season 2, we jump right into this big secret. It's like, I mean, I appreciate the documentation from both Shed Media. Shout out to Shed Media for allowing Paris to also incorporate her own footage in the mix because it added to the rawness of the show. But in episode 1, we see them frantically trying to get things prepared because they know that Phoenix is coming, but no one else does. And that includes everyone in Paris's house staff, her 1111 media company. No one there knows. They had literally kept this just between the two of them. But she is open about doing the IVF. So we do see her administering, is it hormones?
Yes,
That
it's in order to help her eggs produce, like, really produce. I actually happen to be an IVF baby, grown-up IVF
really?
baby. Yes, I know I look fairly, mature for an IVF baby, but, this I believe the first IVF was performed, I wanna say 79, maybe early '80s, and I was born in '88, okay? Late 1900s,
I
and,
know. Still a baby. I was born in '84. Slow down.
okay, well, still the late 1900s as they are telling those Gen Zers in
Oh
school
my
now.
god, I hate that so much, the
So
late 1900s.
it's so offensive. Um, and this was back when they don't do this anymore, but when they put 7 embryos back into my mother. So it was kind of this, and my birthday's in November. My mom was making the joke, if I end up with 7 of these kids, one is going in everyone's stocking in the family, and you all just get some party favors for Christmas. But, it really is wonderful the way reproduction has come with technology because, for some people, being pregnant and giving birth is absolutely terrifying. A lot of people have phobias, a lot of people have issues with the entire idea. And I've been there and done it. I have a 2-year-old, and, it really, what she was going through with keeping it a secret. I mean, I could barely I think took a positive pregnancy test and hadn't even been to the doctor yet before I was like, "Oh my god, I'm pregnant," because it's just it's a huge shift in your life, and I just am astonished they were able to keep it from people who are around them 24/7 because it seems like they're very rarely even alone.
Well, that's what really shocked me was, I mean, you see the amount of people in her house, right? And obviously she knows that they're there, but it's just I started to feel anxiety for her because in this first episode, she's very like on edge and
Yeah.
she's almost like pulling away from certain people because she's afraid to have to lie
Mhm.
unnecessarily or be asked a question around it. So I think the IVF really kind of deflected a lot of that because then I think in people's minds, they were like, oh, at some point we're going to see a bump. Because generally, when someone's doing the IVF, it's because they're trying to get pregnant themselves, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Right. So we
But
also
IVF is
find,
used with surrogacy, so
oh, okay.
mhm.
So we find out that it was Kim Kardashian who actually referred Paris to, I guess, what did she, I laughed. I think she called him an optometrist.
She called the doctor an obstetrician, and, there are, I think, a reproductive, now I'm gonna sound like an idiot, a reproductive specialist, because an obstetrician, it not it's similar to gynecology, but, obstetrician is bringing babies into the world.
Well, thank God for Kim because Kim does
Yeah.
obviously have some experience in this. But essentially, they are preparing for getting the stuff for the baby, everything that they would need. They talk about reading articles because, again, they haven't talked to anybody about any of this because they're keeping it a secret. So they are left to their own to try to make sure that they get everything on this list before baby Phoenix comes. So that was pretty much episode 1. It was kind of this build up to them going to get Phoenix at the
Mhm.
hospital. And so when we get into episode 2, Phoenix then is being born a week early, we find out. So now they're
Mhm.
really scrambling. They weren't expecting it to happen that soon. So they are running to the hospital. Well, actually, they have to run home first because they want to
Mhm.
get stuff prepared in the room, which I have to appreciate. As much as we know the Hilton brand and all of that. Yes, the house is massive. Yes, it's beautiful. But there's still a sense of like, oh, I can actually feel comfortable in this house. Like
It's
it
a
doesn't
home.
feel, yeah, it still feels like a house. And there's something, I don't know if it was Kathy or maybe how Kathy was raised. There's still this sense of like normalcy in some
Mhm.
weird way. I've always found that to be the most fascinating thing about Paris for the entirety of, me following her in this career that she's built for herself. Because, other celebrities wouldn't be running around being like, oh, yeah, I love Chuck E. Cheese pizza. Or I love, like those are like things that they would maybe not say because maybe they're just out of touch. She's out of touch in some ways,
Sure.
but not ways that I would be mad at her for being out of touch. It's just kind of like, that's just what it is.
Exactly.
But when she's setting up the baby room, first of all, the fact that she loves Party City, I'm
I
even more of a bigger fan because it's like,
crack
okay.
me up.
Also, you look like everyone else on their day off. You are running around with 2 little buns, headband, like fun socks,
Thrown
tracksuit,
the hood
sweats.
on.
Love that. And I actually really started to enjoy Carter more because I saw that he is her kind of calm
Oh,
and keeps her
yes.
centered. Because I'll be honest, I wasn't so sure about him last season because we didn't really know who he was. But we get to the hospital and she is obviously frantic and excited and doesn't know
Mhm.
what to expect, right? So we see this is where we're seeing her personal footage and she's getting the camera ready in the room and she's like making everyone wash their hands and she's like freaking out. And then we meet Phoenix for the very first time and she gets to do the head on the chest. And
Mhm.
I think it was just nice to see her being, I don't like
Mom.
a mom.
Yeah.
It really did make me emotional, and I'm not someone who has, like, the itch for a baby, but I think knowing what I know about her, that moment felt extra special watching because it was just for her. That moment was just for her. There was not gonna be a ton of press of her leaving the hospital that day with her new baby. She was gonna be able to keep this just for herself, and I think that is so special, but also it kind of raised a couple red flags. Like, why are we being so secretive to the point where we don't even want to tell Kathy or Nikki, even who Nikki is her best friend? This is her ride or die. She tells her everything for the most part. So that was a little bit, I was a little taken aback. What did you think about her keeping this a secret, not only from the public, which I would understand, but also from her own family?
I think that while she absolutely loves, adores, would do anything in this world for every single one of them, I don't think at that point they were a safe enough space for her to do that. And by doing that, by telling them, it's really, we saw from Nikki that Kathy will post a video that she's just trying to send her of the kids. We, as a mom, you will just randomly send, oh, look at this video. Like I've sent them to so many people. And if I didn't explicitly give permission, especially if you're a public figure to that extent, for you to post a video of my child. I mean, who knows what's in the background? I'm not thinking about that if it's a private video. So we know Kathy is not very well media trained, right? So because she's not well media trained, she doesn't know how to just zip it and, dodge questions in a tactful way. It's just not
Mhm.
Kathy. Hi,
It's
Erin.
really interesting. Hi, Aaron D54. Yes, please hit that like button. That really helps us. No, I mean, honestly, it was really interesting because I was like, I mean, at first I didn't really think all too much on it, but then when I posted the clip the other day of Paris showing Phoenix to Kathy, the comments were very back and forth about this. Like, a
Hmm.
lot of people thought this is really wild and weird that you would do it this way. And a lot of people had a lot of opinions about the fact that Paris wanted to use a surrogate in the first place and why would she do that. Just a lot of like opinions around this whole thing. Well, two things: not telling mom and the family and also using a surrogate. And I feel like, really, is it anyone's business?
It's her
Because I
body.
feel like I don't think it is, right? I mean, everyone can have an opinion, I'm sure, but like to be so, like, some people really like, that is the most
Yeah,
vain thing you could do.
but
You
it
just
may
didn't
not
want
be
to
about
mess up
that.
your body and you just wanted to, and we hear those a lot when people, especially celebrities that come out and say, I'm using a surrogate, people jump to, oh, you didn't want to ruin your body.
Well, and I knew that's what people would automatically assume. Paris is someone that would bounce back immediately, and I think Paris has any means that she possibly could want in this world to bounce back. I don't feel that it was about that. You know, the your mortality increases drastically when you are pregnant. The number of changes that happen in your body, you actually are considered in postpartum for several years after you give birth. I'm still considered in postpartum. The effect it has on your hormones, you know, everything she's been through. What if she had concern about getting PPD or PPA, the postpartum depression, anxiety, what it can do just to your brain. There are people who quite literally will lose their mind and go into a psychosis afterward because of the hormones and that are surging in your body. And then as soon as the baby's out of your body, the drastic drop in those, especially if I'm someone with ADHD, so is Paris. Women with ADHD, we are at the highest risk for, not highest, but you know where I'm going with this. We're at a higher risk, I should say, for developing very, very big issues with our mental health, especially afterward. Because, for an example, my medication that I take, I didn't have to, I could not take the same dose I normally do, but I didn't have to because the up in estrogen that happens in the woman's body, it actually helps alleviate ADD symptoms. And so then when that hormone is just bam gone, what it can do to you is, I mean, absolutely insane. So for the type of schedule we saw that she had, one, being pregnant, doing that, she flying that much when you're pregnant, I mean, you can, but I cannot imagine, like, my feet got, my whole lower half got so swollen. You couldn't, I had no ankles. And if I got on an airplane, it would have been the Michelin Man. So that alone, when you're talking about the physical changes, it's physical, it's hormonal, it's mental, it's, I mean, it's, and it's not very comfortable once you're in the third trimester. Oh my God.
Yeah, see, I
From that,
can't even imagine, and I didn't even think about it from that vantage
yeah.
point, that it could actually have spiraled her more into that trauma, ADD, anxiety-ridden depression that
Mhm.
she's kind of been shelving for so long, right? So,
Yes.
who's to say really what was the real reason? But that has a lot more logic, in my opinion, that if
Mhm.
she was already maybe self-aware that she was dealing with trauma and that was playing out, why would she add that experience to herself and then maybe not be as present, right? Because
Mhm.
now you've got more anxiety and now you're really second guessing everything. And maybe it would have threw her down a rabbit hole emotionally and mentally. And so I think that part was not even of like, I didn't even blink an eye. Like, I don't blink an eye when someone says they use a surrogate because it's
Mm.
like, it's just another way to have a child, is the way I look at it, just like how you can adopt or foster to adopt, whatever have you. Um, it's still her child. So it's not like, I mean, I
Yeah.
get it. She didn't go through that experience, but she does talk about how she wishes she could have been able to do that so that she could feel it. But we also need to discuss Diamond Baby because I was heartbroken and
Mm.
I had known this had happened. And I was actually working with Femtero to try to locate Diamond Baby. I was in contact with Kathy a little bit, trying to see
Oh.
if we could figure out where the location of the dog was. I know Paris also worked with another pet medium to try to find the dog. So that was really sad and heartbreaking. But I think when we get to where Kathy plays her role in all of this is when we have her come. Finally, Paris has a week with the baby. They have their nanny. The nanny seems like she's great. Gina, shout out to Gina. She
Hey,
seemed like
I
she was
wish I
holding
had a
the fort
Gina.
down for Paris.
Mhm.
Also, shout out to Gus. Gus was
Mhm.
the assistant of the decade. It seemed like he was her right hand man. He really kept her calm. He was supportive. He had a lot of empathy. So she does have a good team around her, from what I gathered.
Mhm.
But Kathy did not know what she was walking into. And I feel like this probably sort of traumatized Kathy, because Kathy's probably used to Paris doing stuff like this, where she's like, so this is what it is. And Kathy's just like, oh my God, how I'm going to clean this up. Just
Mhm.
thinking about the history, right? And so she starts off by giving Kathy a nice Chanel bag.
Hey,
That's blue. It was gorgeous.
you ever wanna drop some bomb on me, feel free to give me Chanel first. I won't argue with that.
I
It will
will
soften any blow.
I will not be mad.
Never.
But you must give me the gift first, not after.
Yes.
Not the same effect. I need to have that high of, wow, this is gorgeous. And
Mhm.
then you tell me the bad news, and I can be like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So we meet in the middle that way. See, you're up here,
It's
and then there's the thing
compromise.
down here, and then you go right. It just comes all together.
So Paris is obviously nervous because she doesn't know how her mom's going to react to this news, because she's been holding it a secret for so long, but she's going to finally bring baby Phoenix in. So she goes and gets him, puts the blanket over, walks in, and Kathy absolutely loses it and just is in complete shock, as I think anybody would be, or any mom would be. I'm sure if you had kept McCoy a secret, however you could have done that because you were pregnant with him. But if you were not living with your mom, you never told her you were pregnant for 9 months, had the baby, came to visit, and then just was like, hey, mom,
She
surprise. What would she do?
That's such a great question. I think she would probably, knowing my mother, she would just be thrilled to see the baby. But then she'd be like, "How the hell?" My mom's from Oklahoma. "How the hell did you keep this a secret?" Caitlin? Now, I don't want to say my full name, but I have 4 names and they go up in cadence. She
Oh,
says
yes.
each name. Marshall. Like,
I would
I'm like,
I
"You
would
did that
be
on
too
purpose."
terrified to say anything at that point. It's like I would just feel like, oh no, this is like really a bomb that I'm about to drop on her, and it could go either way.
I would have been freaking out as well. Of course, Paris and Kathy have a totally different relationship. Kathy is, I mean, we knew Kathy was kind of flighty and all over the place, but my God, um, when Paris was doing her IVF injections and she's like trying to show her Birkin and this like Chanel brooch, and Paris is like, "Yeah, I don't really care about that right now, mom." So it's if Kathy had actually been paying attention, it wouldn't have been quite as shocking, but I still don't think she would have expected a whole ass baby to be coming out from under that blanket.
No, I really think Kathy just thought, oh, she's just doing these things because she's trying to have a family.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
also, it started to become clear that Kathy has tics. And we got to see a lot of that. We actually got to know Kathy on a whole new level, I feel like,
Oh,
watching this.
yes.
I appreciate now, because I think if you watch it, I think you'll have a little bit more understanding of Kathy and why maybe she acts this way. And that comes up a little bit later in this season.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
you know, the elephant also in the room is Paris is a busy woman, okay? She's got 7 million product lines. She's got her company. She is traveling. She's a DJ. Now she's a mom and a wife. They moved into a new house. I mean, what more could you fit into a week's schedule for her? Because some of those fittings we saw, those people were there at like midnight,
Mhm.
because that's when she had an open time. That's wild. Could you imagine
No.
getting up at
No.
4:30 in the morning
Mm.
and just going, and then just still having a fitting at 11 p.m. and then having to get on a flight the next morning?
I would be
I
so
would
bloated is all
lose
I
it.
can think of.
Ho You saw how we were just going to Vegas, and we knew we were going, like, 7 months in advance, and we
Oh
didn't
my
have all these
god.
things in between that were making us have to get on and off a plane, you know? So I'm like, "Holy crap." Now, I get it, she has a team of people helping her, but even still, I think that's, like, overwhelming for anyone.
It is. And then, her expressing the mom guilt she feels. There is something that happens when you have a child that It could be the most minor thing that is completely out of your control, completely. And suddenly you're like, this is all my fault. I've ruined my child. He's going to have trauma. He, she, they are going to just blame me the rest of their lives. I have ruined them. And I mean, that's another thing. Whenever you have a little one and you're having to rush through things and you want to have your time with them and then you have to really like figure out a way to compartmentalize, that is very hard. And someone like her, it's probably just about damn near impossible to set your phone down. And that's something I struggle with my son. Is he's gotten to a point where he'll push my phone away and say stop it. And so I'm like, okay, okay, I have to listen because I want him to know he's more important than my phone screen. But when you're working and mothers, we all know there's a different onus put on mothers when it comes to balancing everything.
Yeah.
It's just it
I don't
because
know how you guys do it. I really don't.
I don't either. It really does take that village. I may not have had a Gina. I had my mother helping and she still does tremendously. That's the only thing that I was like, oh, I was telling you before we got on here. In the beginning, in that first 6-month period, if I had had a Gina, oh my God. I y I have legitimate PTSD from the lack of sleep. When you're only getting maybe 2 hours of sleep a night, and it's not even when you decide you're getting the 2 hours and you're interrupted, by a little one, it's like it's just a completely different type of torture, and so I'm glad she had her to help with that schedule she has. Mhm,
Absolutely. And Aaron D54 says mothers are judged so much harder and have so much more pressure put on them. Which
mhm.
I agree, they do. Because listen, the simple fact is people are going to judge her, right? Because we got to see her going in the baby room,
Yeah.
saying bye. I'll try to be back as soon as I can. And she's jetting out and then she's jetting right back. And I can see the comments now. I
Mhm.
can just see them. But let's put it in perspective. If this was Carter, and this was Carter in love, and Carter was the one zooming in and out, everyone was like, wow, he is such a boss ass man, businessman, taking care
Exactly.
of the fort. He's a dad. But when she does it, they're like, oh, so you just had a baby for an accessory just so you could have one, but you're not ever around. And so Gina's really the attachment figure. And I just find that to be so unfair. So thank you, Aaron,
Mhm.
for pointing that out because I don't think that's brought up enough in these situations, specifically when you're talking about someone like Paris, who obviously has the resources. She could do that really if she wanted. She could,
Yeah.
yes, I could have babies and let Gina raise them
Mhm.
while I continue to build my empire. Because let's be clear, that's how Paris was raised.
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely. And as I was watching, I thought, "Oh, why not, show everyone every little thing?" And then I noticed something and I went, "Wow." Even I stopped and thought, "Uh-oh, oh, that she should or shouldn't do this," just as an example because it's something that I even did. So, it's not me criticizing her. When I saw that Phoenix was sleeping in the Dockatot, which is that it kind of looks like they had it inside of the crib and it's for when
The thing that
they
moves?
no, it's I forget what you would call it, like it's a lounger and they had it inside of the crib. Well, it is very much do not let your baby sleep in the Dockatot. There have been babies that have not made it out of sleeping in that. Yes. My son,
Oh, I thought you meant like they didn't make it out alive, like something
yes, I
happened.
I do mean that. I'm trying to,
Oh,
you know,
oh,
w trigger warning type of thing.
okay.
And then, my lactation consultant was like, "No, let him sleep in the Dockatot all you want." And I will never forget between that and McCoy would sleep in the Dockatot next to me, when I'd be, like, sitting on the sofa or something when he would be sleeping during the day because we had no effing idea what we were doing when it came to, how to regulate his sleep.
Mhm.
So, and I thought, man, that's something that I even did, but I just know here they're gonna come. here come the people that are going to be like chirping in her ear about it. You know, I remember the first night I brought McCoy home, I'd heard, "Oh, let babies sleep with a pacifier." I could not, but you shouldn't do that because then nipple confusion for breastfeeding. I couldn't sleep because I couldn't stop Googling. Do I let him sleep with the pacifier or not? So it's like, of course, every little thing, it's terrifying that then if I had someone watching me, even one single person, but millions, that's that's a lot that she took on by going ahead and showing him because she said, "Hey, here's my life. I'm going to show my life." And I think, it's something that people, maybe even other mothers, wouldn't have considered how much she was like, "Okay, I'm really opening the door to criticism, to hate, to all of it."
Oh, 1000%. I thought the same thing watching it back because I was like, oh dear. I know she's the executive producer, but she's showing way more than the Kardashians have shown how they took care of their children. So it was just really interesting that she put herself out there so vulnerably and like, is that a word, vulnerably? Did I just make that up? You know what I mean. But like, I was really, really excited to see her be a mom or interact with her baby because I think most people just, at least for me, I don't. It's not that I picture her not being a mother, but I just always know her for being Paris and always out and about and doing all these things. So it was just wild to watch her be affectionate with this baby that's hers and falling in love with her baby and finding some peace. I feel like she found some peace, even though it didn't obviously change any of the trauma that she's having to sift through. I feel like Phoenix coming into her life was kind of like a healing for her in a lot of ways because I think something that comes up later in the season is almost like, you know, it gives her the chance to change what was wronged in her experience. And it was like the beginning of this relationship blooming between her her point of view in terms of her marriage and how that plays into now being a parent with Carter. And then also having to let other people weigh in and help her and give advice and her just being a sponge and trying to understand. Like the part that stuck out to me was when she was at home and it was like one of the first few episodes and Gina gives her the baby and she's like, I don't know how to. You can tell she's anxious. I don't want to snap this baby's neck. It's so fragile. I don't feel comfortable. And I'm the same way. Whenever I've gone to a hospital, which hasn't been that many times, guys, for like a baby's birth, whenever it's like the moment was like, do you want to hold the baby? And it's like, I do, but I don't because it's so fragile that I'm like, I don't know how I would, like, I don't think I would have a lot of anxiety
It's
just
responsibility.
if I was alone and had to go retrieve the baby by myself. It would probably give me a little bit of a panic attack. I'm not lying. And I'm not saying maybe in the moment I wouldn't have the instinct and figure it out. But I would just, again, imposter syndrome. Like, are you sure about this? Did you make the right decision here? Because you're not even comfortable even holding your baby. So, but nonetheless, we have this memoir looming in the background that Paris has been working on. And I think up until a certain point, obviously the documentary shed light on her abuse when she was in the Provo Canyon and some other schools. But I think it's clear Paris left a lot out when it came to what she actually disclosed to her sister, her family. And, having parts of that book being brought back up, I didn't realize that Kathy didn't know about some of those things, right? I mean, were you shocked by that? Did you just think that, like, perhaps at this point, everyone should know because you're writing the book and you're talking
Right.
about people? So wouldn't you have at least let them know, like, hey, I'm just letting you know this is what I'm saying about this experience involving you, right? I
Yes.
I'm seeing that they didn't do that at all. Like they didn't check in with Kathy, like, hey, did you know your daughter
No.
was, graped or, essayed and roofied. So that was probably hard for Kathy to have to, I would be anxious too, but I also understood why she didn't maybe want to do that, because I could see how that could turn into, I don't think you should put that in the book, or no, that's not how it went, or, you start going down that spiral. And I'm speaking from experience, because when my dad passed away, my siblings and I had a little meeting, if you will, that did not go very well, because I disclosed some things that I felt that were traumatic to me. And they took that
Oh,
defensively, because they didn't like it. But that's where I feel empathy for Paris in this. I understand she's keeping things secretive. But at the same turn, I don't think she would have been able to write the book as open and honestly if she had other people in her ear who were a part of the story in some capacity. So,
totally agree. The thing is, because we did see Kathy end up blaming the ghostwriter.
yes. Yes.
So, I'm sorry, there is a beeping going off in the background.
I can't hear it.
Oh, you can't? Okay, good.
No.
Because I was like, I keep trying to mute it. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear the train that's been railing by on my end?
No,
Oh, wonderful.
no.
We're having a great Friday then.
Yeah,
We
there's a
can't hear
timer.
each
That's why I
other's
keep
shit.
muting. I'm sorry. That just so you
No, you're
know, I'm like
fine.
trying to, um, I think just by the way Kathy, like I said, was trying to blame the ghostwriter, and then just as you were saying that giving them the heads up, it may not have stayed her story once they knew, because then it would have become about what their version of the story was, and no one needed to know their version of the story. If they want to write a book, go right ahead, but this was about Paris's story. And I can't imagine hearing, if you didn't know, that something like that happened to your child. And part of what's difficult for people, grown adults who experience trauma like that as children and as young adults, when they go tell their parents, if the parent is not very well therapized in their own sense, then they make it about it being sometimes their own fault. And then the child, essentially, the adult child, is left comforting the parent when it shouldn't be that way. Or the parent ends up not believing them, as we know, what have you. And, there are a lot of different outcomes that can really make it even more traumatizing for that adult child if the parent isn't ready for it. And I don't think anyone ever is, but you have to truly have a sense of, this is my child coming to me with something. Maybe my version is different, but they're telling me their truth. And at the end of the day, everyone has different truths about how things played out because their own feelings warp the perception of it. That being said, it's very validating, I imagine, but also devastating for Paris to hear all the other stories that came out of this place. And I can't. It's like one of those bittersweet type of things. I'm sure for her to know, okay, it wasn't in my head, it wasn't just me, but she probably hates. She was saying she was crying reading all the other stories. So being the person to bring change to something is not easy to do, and it's scary. But I think, at least personally, before watching Paris in Love, all of that, when the articles came out and when she was going to Washington DC and having these conversations and speaking publicly, my view of her changed drastically. Not that I thought she wasn't a good person, anything like that, but the way she was handling herself, I found very admirable. Yes, she has the platform because of who she is, but we didn't get the "Oh my god, that's hot, Paris." We got the "That's hot, Paris." And that's something else that fascinated me, was watching, knowing that her voice goes into that higher baby voice whenever she's anxious, and seeing whenever she was like, "No, I want you to take me seriously." It was like two different voices, completely two different people in general. And I think that should really tell people that she's trying her best to be authentic, but when you're in front of people all the time, it's also hard to know who you actually are when you've been playing that character for so long.
Or what real reality you're in at that moment. Like, there's cameras around, so should I be Paris Hilton, that's hot, or hey, sup, like, because she is a tomboy. And I think a lot of people don't realize, well, you should realize that watching season 2, because you see she's like, she's like a little boy. She has a Rice Krispies in her cup, and they're putting her in the truck
Scooter.
with a little backpack and sending her on her way. Um, but I think when we start to get to, I don't remember if it was the Glamour magazine interview that she did, where she kind of exposes some of these things that are in the book in the article. I think she first mentioned that she had her abortion at 20 and that she was raped and roofied when she met this guy at a mall with some of her friends. And so understanding that she has to do press for her book and understanding that maybe some of the things in the book were not relayed to Kathy and or the powers that be at the Hilton residence. I think this was a misstep for Paris. I think doing this interview and not at least giving a heads up to Kathy and Nikki at the very least was kind of more traumatizing for Kathy and more of an embarrassment. And I can't tell, and I don't mean this to be mean, but I almost feel the reason why I'm saying this, because this is something that I would do subconsciously. It's not that you're trying to get back at anyone, but subconsciously you are, if you know what I'm saying. Like, no, you
Mhm.
weren't there for me. So subconsciously, I'm going to throw you out to the wolves. You're going to read about this in the press. And I'm not saying she did it on purpose or that was the strategy by any means. But the way it kind of worked itself out, it seems like that's the impact it always leaves. Like, Kathy's left out of the equation when it comes to the baby. And there's these elements where Paris has drawn the line in the sand to say, I'm not going to allow you past this line, unfortunately, but we can continue to work on our relationship and get closer in this space, but it's got to be on my terms. Like, I can't go down the Kathy Hilton rabbit hole because we know Kathy likes to get in there, and we saw with the wedding. She completely took over that wedding, and it was pretty much Kathy's wedding by the end until Paris had to step in and be like, no, like, we want it this way, or like whatever have you. So that was an interesting push pull. But I did feel bad for Kathy. I'm not going to lie, because I can't imagine. I'm not a parent, but if I was a parent and my older child was writing a book and then did an article, and then people are calling me to be like, oh my gosh. And you're like, what? And they like, oh, what? Excuse me? Like, I would
Mhm.
be distraught. Would you not?
Yes.
I know that's selfish, but I
No,
you
it's
know what I
it's
mean?
not no, because here's the thing, this is where I can easily say I see both sides of it where, you know, Paris probably didn't know any right way to sit her mother down and tell her, because if she tries to have any semblance of a serious conversation, just the 2 of them, I mean, she's off in the middle of talking. Do I need Botox here? Like, it's my God. And that I imagine that's really, at the end of the day, more than frustrating, it's probably hurtful. And I would think that she probably wouldn't feel heard because her mom wasn't even hearing her as she's like, ow, I'm in pain. Because as mothers, we are like biologically programmed when it's our child. Like any noise my son makes, I can't, like, no matter what it is, my body reacts to it, whether I want it to or not. That's something I try and explain, for example, to my mom whenever my son starts trying to interrupt, anyone talking. That's his thing right now, trying to assert some power. And, my mom will say, just keep talking over him. And I'm like, I can't. I genuinely cannot, because I can't think when he's making any sort of distressed sound. And so while it's been a while since Paris was a baby, I'm, not saying that Kathy's a bad mother for not responding that way now. My point is that I don't think there was the best time to ever actually tell her. I think Paris actually hoped the book was going to be done and she'd give a copy to Kathy, which I don't think that Kathy would have read the 380-page book that quickly if the article hadn't already come out. I
No,
think it would have been sitting on the nightstand. Oh yeah, I'll get to it. And it would have, been Paris sitting there twiddling her thumbs, waiting for her mother to read the book. But that's where I'm glad to see the direction that those two went, because all I kept thinking was, if anyone needs therapy together, it's these two, because they could both benefit from being in the same room together with a third party, really mediating the situation. I think I think now maybe Paris would have handled it that way. That's probably the best way she could have handled it, by telling her mom, saying, "Can you come to therapy with me?" But again, I don't know that Kathy would have been as eager to go had she not already been exposed to it. So at the end of the day, was there really any better way? Probably. Would it have been as effective? Probably not.
no. I mean, we kind of saw that though, right? When you mentioned like when she turns and she's like, "Do I need Botox?" Like dead smack in the middle of this conversation about the ghostwriter, and you know how publicists do. They like to add things to think. Do I need Botox here? And Nikki's face's register was like, "Oh wow, this is like this is what we're talking about." Like she
Mhm.
literally was just talking about this with Parrot. Like she's got this
Yes.
stick fix, and they flashback, and even in her interview, she's like asked a serious question. She's just like, "Lips are so dry." Like
Constant.
it's this. There's an angst. It's as if Kathy knows there's stuff that she's got to process with Paris, but she would rather distract herself and move on to something funny or fun or lighthearted, which I understand truly. But from Paris's point of view, she's almost got to walk on eggshells to just be herself and speak her truth, because the egos and the perception other people may have had about that experience might not align with that, and that could erupt into so many different things that you are just trying to tell your story. You're not then trying to worry about how this is impacting other people. Not that you wouldn't care how your mom takes this information, but at the same time, you're correct. Kathy skimmed that book quickly because Nikki called her and was like, "Holy shit.
Yep. Yep.
What are we getting into?" Because what else is in that book? If in this article, this is what's highlighted, what's in that book? Give me that book. Where's that damn book? Like,
Yeah.
where is it?
Where's the
You know,
transcript? Uh-huh.
it's just insane. And
Manuscript.
I literally feel like this show, I think, has been therapeutic for Paris and Kathy. I'm just gonna
Mhm.
say that. Whatever forced, because we know, and I think they say this, the only reason I think Paris is the one that says this. The reason why we're even having these conversations is because of production.
Mhm.
Or maybe it was Nikki that said it, but it's like this. If there was no cameras in the room, they would not have addressed probably 80% of the things that were brought up. They would have done probably passive aggressive things of avoidance and like ignoring it. Like Kathy probably would have ignored it or whatever. Or maybe she would have gotten angry. I don't know. But you start to see that there's a push pull with her, and she's almost, when she's gearing up for even going to DC to
Mhm.
do the advocacy work that she's doing, which shout out to Paris, because she's been here 4 or 5 times in the last year. So for anyone out there that thinks she's just doing this to slap her name on something, you are so wrong.
Right.
She's been here multiple times meeting with people to try to get this changed on a federal level. And I do believe at this point, with all the exposure and everything that she's brought to light, we will see this turn into a federal protection where they do have to be transparent. These boarding schools have to be transparent. But nonetheless, as she's gearing up for DC, there's this question of, does Kathy come or not? Because Kathy didn't really like it last time. She didn't like having to rehear the story of Paris and the abuse. And I'm sure that was very uncomfortable for Kathy last season. And in fact, it was. She wanted to get the hell out of there,
Mhm.
because I'm sure it's hard for her. She was bamboozled when she was just trying to
Support.
essentially save her daughter from getting hurt. But
Yeah.
then in fact, she gets hurt. And I can see that being like, you're screwed if you do, you're screwed if you don't, I guess, right?
That's basically being a parent.
Essentially, that's what I'm learning.
It is, yeah, which basically just means for the most part, there's no right way to do a lot of these things. Um, you know, I was anxious watching them trying to wrangle Kathy to get out there. There was something I wanted to add that I was thinking, which is that obviously Kathy was on the one season of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think it made her more digestible the way she behaved on Paris in Love season 1 and 2, because we had already gotten a taste of how she is in an environment where the stakes aren't as high because these women were not her children, obviously.
Right.
And obviously, Paris in Love came right after that season aired. I don't think Kathy ever had plans of going back on there. She had no reason to because she's already got this going on. So I think if we had gotten our first taste of Kathy Hilton in Paris in Love, we would not be viewing her quite as um with uh, with as much endearment as we do at the moment. That being said, because a moment like them trying to get her to get out the door to go to Capitol Hill, we're like, oh, that's Kathy. But if we hadn't known that before, I think we would have been like, what is this woman's problem? You know what I mean?
Well, shout out to Nikki Hilton because she's the driving force, my loves.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nikki, if
Mhm.
you ever come across this recap, shout out to you because you are the sister, the daughter,
The
you are
mama,
everything because when she walks in, she's like, "What are you doing?
she's in
What are
charge.
you doing? We need to go." Like
Mhm.
3 hours ago, ma'am. What are you doing? And she's just in there like, "I just feel weak."
I need
And
yogurt before I faint.
it's this moment of like I'm deflecting and I'm not trying to I don't want to go there.
Mm-mm.
She's sensitive. You can tell
Mhm.
Kathy's very sensitive,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think that's why she has to stay on the high because she can get real low because we see a little glimpse of that and we learn something
Mhm.
about her childhood that answers
Mhm.
a lot of questions around why she acts the way she does, specifically with her children. Now, when we get to DC, we see Carter finally come into the room, and Kathy has gotten herself dressed and she comes out. But we can't just ignore that Carter is absolutely annoyed and not happy with Kathy. You can just tell his
Mhm.
energy is just kind of like, yep, great, let's go. Let's go.
Mhm.
Yep, cool,
Mhm.
cool, cool. All right, love ya. Let's go. Like, because it's just like, come on. And in his interview, he says this would be the deterrent on whether or not she's invited back to do this again, because all it does is add more stress to Paris if she's got to
Right.
worry about how this is all going to impact her mom every time. So there was that push pull, but then we get back from DC, in which she had a stellar time here. Clearly, she got more signatures. She was able to
Mhm.
have a more I feel a more serious conversation about the real issues without it just being like, oh, I need to talk past this Paris Hilton that's hot
Mhm.
Dale. Now they're
Mhm.
being, okay, what is going on? How can we help? So that was nice to see as someone who's a big fan of hers because I've always known that's not who she really is. But it's nice in this I don't even, this isn't a reality show. It's more of a docu-series, I would say,
Yeah.
because it really documented some stuff that was more reality based that I wasn't expecting them to cover.
Mhm.
But we finally get a moment where Paris and her mom finally sit down and Kathy says something pertaining to when Nikki called her out and said, when we were kids, you wouldn't tell us if a fish died, if a pet died, if something bad happened. You would just move on and keep it happy and light and fluffy, right?
Mhm.
This might explain where all the unicorns and rainbows that Paris surrounds herself with comes from because it's like a safety net. It's like you're in la la land. And I can understand that because most of my 20s, I put up a front and pretended to be something I wasn't because it was safe for me to do that because then nobody could really hurt me because that's not who I really was. And
Mm.
so now the veil's coming down. They're having a real conversation. And Paris is like, well, you don't like to talk about anything bad, and you never wanted us to know anything that was bad. And then Kathy explains something that was heartbreaking to me, and I did not know this, was, and I was a little shocked because I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday, where Kathy's not really good about talking about her mom in a negative space. Obviously, we saw that play out when Kyle tried to do that show that was loosely based on
Right.
her mom.
American Woman. Uh-huh.
But she does go into the fact that when she was growing up, her mom was very much a straight shooter and would say things about her stepfather around her, and
To her friends.
it made Kathy feel really bad for this man who treated and loved her as if she were his own.
Mhm.
And then she says, "I felt bad for him," and she started to sob. And that broke my heart. It's just sad because you see the pain that Kathy may have held on to. And maybe
Mhm.
there's other stuff, I'm sure, that is in there that she's not going to disclose on Paris's reality show.
Right.
But it's clear that that was when Kathy realized, like, I'm not going to do that. That's mean. And I will never do that to my children. And that's why she did what she did. So it's interesting. It's like you go from one extreme and it calls you, having it be so blunt, and you can hear every bad thing that your mom says about your stepfather or whoever. And then you turn around and do none of that, like zero, to the point where you're like, nope, nothing's wrong.
Yep.
Nothing's wrong. But your kids secretly know something's wrong and you're hiding something from me, but we don't really know. Um, it was just very interesting to see that come out full circle, because I essentially think Paris and Kathy are pretty much the same.
They're very similar. Something that when it comes to having children, you either, as the child, you want to either have a relationship, marriage, what have you, just like your parents, or the exact opposite. Same
Mhm.
thing, you want to have a mom or father who is just in the same way that yours are, or you want something completely different. And I think Kathy took that and went, she's been with Rick for how many years? She's created, to her best ability, as much of a stable environment as she could. um Kathy's a very good example of a mother with ADD that did not get the type of help she needed and the type of skill set to be taught to her, because that's something, if you don't know you have that and you just think, oh, this is just the way life is, and then you don't even have to go on medication if you don't want to. You can learn skill sets to help alleviate some of the symptoms, and Kathy learned none of that. So I think she just does the best she can. It's interesting too, as you had been mentioning, how you experienced with your family after your father passed, how they had a completely different view of specific events in your life. And I think that it shows, for example, that Kathy's the oldest. She will have a better memory for the most part of any of the negative experiences than, say, Kyle, being the baby, would have.
Yeah.
And so I think that she probably has a whole bank of things that she has pushed and shoved down so far that she is just terrified of opening that floodgate. And I think she was just barely starting to, that, and I imagine that what she was bringing up that her mother would say regarding her stepfather, that must have been just a very small tip of the iceberg. So
Oh,
I hope Kathy is at least getting therapy, whether she's with Paris and cameras are around or not, because from what we know of her childhood, it was wild and intense and not normal. And at least to most people's standards, I should say, because what is normal? But I would hope for her to at least be able to navigate the world in a more comfortable place, you know, um, because you could tell there was a lot of weight that was taken off of her from that one. And I'm not saying it was insignificant, but my point is, I imagine there was much worse, much more, much deeper. And that little thing she just seemed like more, I don't know, just weightless at that point.
Yeah, it almost felt like she had a little release
Mhm.
emotionally. Like it was just trapped in there and she just
Mhm.
needed to say it out loud for herself. Like I
Mhm.
really did not like that. From her experience. Like I did not like the way it made me feel about my stepfather. I felt sad for him. I felt bad for him when my mom left him the way she did, and the way she spoke about him was just so, you could tell it impacted and rattled her because it's just like,
Mhm.
I don't understand.
Mhm.
Why would you do that? So it adds a layer of empathy to the situation because up until this point, we were all mind boggling over why you can't just cop to it. Come on, Kathy. Come on. Just sit down and have this conversation so we can move on. What's
Right.
holding you back, love? Because we want you guys to get past this. We've started seeing a little bit of this in season one,
Mhm.
gearing up for the wedding, the control, the image, because this comes from Big Kathy. Big Kathy was
Mhm.
about the appearances, dressing them like dolls. You're pretty, you're gorgeous, you're this. And that's really what the front-facing value of everything was appearances. And I think Paris obviously grew up in a place where she was also dressed like a doll
Oh,
and was
yeah.
also made to feel like, she's a baby doll and she was gorgeous. And she talks about how her grandmother, Big Kathy, would always say, "You are going to be a big star. You are this, you are that," which those things are positive to instill. Don't get me wrong. I think that's
Sure.
great. But I can't imagine from Kathy's point of view, then having a daughter like Paris, who was like, peace. Because I'll be honest with you
Mhm.
guys out there, I was I was not far away from what she was doing
Mm.
at all. And my parents were much older because they had me a lot later in life. So
Yeah.
I put them through the ringer. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
The amount of times I would finagle sneaking out of my house, the situations I put myself in, looking
Yeah.
back on it now, the fact that I'm still alive and wasn't kidnapped, trafficked, God forbid, murdered,
Mm.
it dawns on me, and I think about my parents more now and why they were so angry. Because I'd always be like, "What is the big deal? I just want to go have fun, and you guys are
Mhm.
restricting that from me." But it's like, obviously, we're in a different world now. Like if I had a kid, and this would probably be my karma. That's probably why I'm not having a child, because I
Mm.
know that child would be a healthy blend of some like rebel and chaos, and it would give me a run for my money
They
to the
do.
point where I would probably lose all of my hair. Maybe not, but you never know because that's sometimes how it goes. But I think that in the situation, this was the first time we saw them actually moving past at least their communication issue, or it was an
Mm.
opening for them to at least be more honest.
Mhm.
But if that's not keeping Paris busy enough, you guys, she's also got a concert because she's recording new music. So we get to see her in the studio. We see her working on some new tracks and preparing for this LA show. Now, she's never done a live show. I remember when the album came out and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for more. We all
Mhm.
were. If you are a Paris fanatic, you've been waiting as long as we all have been for this like concert to take place.
Right.
We get to see a friendly face. Well, I don't know if he's friendly for everybody, but Mikey is actually the guy.
Mikey Minden, yes.
I mean,
Sh
hi. Did she call Erica Jane and say, "Hi, babe, can you help me?" Like,
Yeah, listen, she is completely his wheelhouse, and the way
totally.
I mean that is someone who's kind of kitschy and someone who isn't used to that type of performing, who hasn't been a lifelong dancer. He just was in his space, man, like that. It was exciting to see him there because when I heard Mikey, I was like looking and I'm like, I don't see him. And it wasn't until they were actually at the theater that I was like, oh my God, it is Mikey.
It was so funny. I was like, "Oh wow, like this is up his alley," because he essentially can take someone who just loves music and just loves the performance factor and
Yeah.
sort of create this experience where the person does get that feeling that they're the
Yeah.
pop star, but they're not like, I mean, and I appreciate Paris when she's having that very open dialogue about like, I don't want to go out there and look like an idiot and be made fun of. I'm not a singer. I'm not a dancer. I
Right.
just love it so much. So I just want
Yeah.
it to be like this. So I appreciate that because some people are a little bit like, they really do think that they're like
Oh, yeah.
a singer. And so it's a girl. Calm down. You just love music and that's fine. And I love you for that. But we see that it's not going the way that she may have thought it would go, or maybe she bit off more than she could chew. The
Mhm.
rehearsals are a little bit more intense. She is not a dancer. I love Paris. I love her, but I think she would agree. She can't do the bebop. She can't do too much of it, right?
She doesn't
At
have that
least in
8
the
count in her
rehearsals,
head.
she was struggling. She was struggling. And then we get to the venue, and then it's the pressure's really on. So
Yeah.
much so that it's causing pain in her back, and her back is now a problem. And she is frantic because now, do we cancel the show? But if I cancel it, all these people are going to be so disappointed, and I can't do that to them because they've been waiting for so long. I and she's just crying in bed with Carter, which is
Mhm.
a very real moment
It was.
for a
It was.
couple. For one of the people to come home and be like, I don't think I can do this. I want to, but I just don't think I can.
Listen, I think no matter how much you and I were kind of talking about this yesterday, off air. It doesn't matter how much you love and enjoy doing something, there are going to be moments where you're like, "I hate this right now. I don't wanna do it anymore. I can't take it. Don't make me go out there. Don't make me speak to another human being. If you put another blot of blush on my face, I will scream." And especially if you're already in pain. But, you know, it's not to say that she didn't want to and all of that. It's sometimes that imposter syndrome amplifies that feeling so intensely that you're like, "No one's even gonna like it anyway. Why am I even doing this?" Clearly, I've had this internal dialogue plenty
Oh,
of
me too. That's why
times.
when she was saying that, I was like, "Oh, I've had that conversation many a times. Are you
Mhm.
kidding?" Like, "Oh, please, no one's even watching you.
Yeah,
You don't have to worry about that today."
exactly.
It's
I think
real.
I think from the landscape of how the public consumes things like Paris doing a show like that is not the same as the way it was in the early 2000s when she really hit that big rise in fame. And I think she still has that portion, which rightfully so. I mean, that was traumatizing the way people would speak about her and, the way she was treated just in general. So I don't think people are okay with just being mean and making fun of someone just for the hell of it anymore.
Yeah.
At least not anyone in my stratosphere that I see. There are still plenty out there, I should say. But just like her friend assistant, who was that guy, who wanted her to
Gus?
go was it Gus who was having what or he was just all dressed up?
Oh, no. It was, I think that guy's name was Ethan. I think it's her
Yes.
music manager
Okay. That makes
or
because I was like, "Wait a minute."
someone that works with her. Is
Mhm.
that the one where he was like, "Can you go like this hot guy's photos for me?" And
I
she's
mean, that's
like
a
laughing.
flex.
She's like, "Hello. Okay,
Yeah.
fine."
Yeah.
She's
No,
like, "I'll make you
totally.
look
I love
stupid
that
out
he
on
asked.
stage, and I'll go like whoever's photos you want."
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but yeah, that is a flex. Like,
Oh my god.
if you
Totally.
think somebody's hot and then they love Paris coincidentally, and then you get Paris to follow and dare I say like a few of those photos, that would send someone over the moon, at least get you a dinner date.
Hell
Uh,
yes, it
should
would.
get you laid, actually, I would think.
Mhm.
But I I see this like build up in her, and then I'm not gonna lie, I was a little concerned. I wasn't at the LA show, unfortunately. I wish I could have gone, but I was a little concerned. I was like, oh no, how's this gonna actually go?
Combining
And
it all.
we
The
get to the
singing
build
and the
up
dancing.
of just the like getting ready for it, then getting to the stage and the build up, and then here we go. And I have to say, she did fantastic. No, she's not the best dancer in the world, but she moved and grooved and stayed in the flow so well that
Mhm.
I thought from what we got to see from that concert, she did an amazing job.
I
Like
think
she
she
gave
did
us
as
a
well.
show.
Yes, I can hardly chew gum and walk at the same time, and being able to dance and sing at the same time is a whole other skill set because that's like I said, she didn't come out with the 8 count in her head. She's not always had that as a part of her repertoire. So I think she did fantastic. And just like that guy Ethan was saying to her, it's when you don't go ahead and commit to doing it and you're holding back and you're restricting yourself, that's when people kind of feel like, but when you just say, hey, I'm gonna do this, I'm free, I'm here, and I completely get where she was with that because oh my gosh, I remember when I used to do beauty pageants. My pageant coach and my mom would be like, Caitlin, you can sing, try and sing. I could not even sing in front of just my mom and my pageant coach. And then once I started doing sketch comedy, and I was like, you know what? I need to make it about committing to the character and not worrying about how I sound. It didn't matter anymore, and it all flowed together at the end of the day. And I think for Paris, she probably went ahead and said, okay, let me put on the Paris Hilton character. And she did it. And sometimes having that like extra persona can benefit people. That would probably keep a lot of people from drinking too much alcohol or doing drugs, from, feeling comfortable in their own skin. And whatever she needs to do to put on that second mask, she did it. And I think she did fantastic.
Listen, my original Twitter handle was Greek Paris Hilton because I had blonde hair. I had blonde hair for like 8 years, platinum blonde, and blue eyes because I found the company that she ordered her blue contacts from the minute I knew that she was wearing them, and done. So all I will say to your
I
point
love
is
it.
that saved me from going into such a dark hole at a young
Mhm.
age that may not have come out of. So yes, it's deflecting. Yes, it's like you are not being yourself, but sometimes that's necessary to get through something. It's not
Mhm.
healthy to do that throughout your whole life, which is what we learn when she goes to therapy and then goes with her mom, because you have to know when to use the tools in your toolbox. And the concert was the right time to pull
Exactly.
out the Paris Hilton character rather than going to the grocery store and constantly feeling like you have to be this one character. So I was very
Mhm.
excited for that. And I think it was a good way for her to finish that and then set some new boundaries, because in the midst of preparing for this show, she misses a milestone moment with her son. And that's sad. I can't imagine what that feeling would be like, but I have major FOMO. And if someone had sent me a video of my baby laughing for the first time rather than me being around, I probably
Mm.
would have been sobbing because it just
Yeah.
would have made me feel like garbage that yes, I love what I do, but at the same time, where is my priority right now?
Oh, yeah. I
And that's
felt for
gotta be
her.
the hardest part to shift back and forth from, because it's like, well, yeah, I don't think it's fair for someone to say, "Oh, well, you have a baby now, so you need to drop all of this." But at the same time, you've got to be able to steer whatever you're working on to work around your needs, because essentially you're the boss. You
Yeah.
have the luxury to do that. And it's not that Paris needs to work for money. We all know that. But I
No,
do
right.
appreciate her work. I do appreciate her work ethic and the fact that she has made her own money the minute she became a rebel in her family
Mhm.
and decided she's going to do it her way. She was cut off financially at a certain point and was like, I don't need your money. I'm going to make my own. And here's how: by pissing you guys off every week, because I'll be on every tabloid and be the it girl of this town. But I'll do it on my own terms. I'll make my own money, and I'm going to live in a house where every paparazzi can just come up to me when I pull into the driveway
Yep.
and be
Yep. Oh,
fully
those days.
accessible. Because that's what I would do. I'm like, what's the most accessible house that we can get?
What
No
can you
date.
see from the 405? How can you
I
tell a
would
zoom
love
in?
a helicopter shot every now and again.
Yes,
No, I
actually, 405 and the 101. Just make sure it's at the out make sure they cross over, okay?
absolutely. I mean, I think what it showed her, though, after this concert was like, okay, I can do things that I put my mind to. I can do it all. But now I don't necessarily have to keep proving I can
Right.
do all these things. I can pick and choose things, or even better, make it happen at my house, right? This is something that I think the Kardashians showed us.
Mhm.
They didn't
Mhm.
go off and buy these massive corporate sized buildings.
No.
Like Kim built a whole section of her property. Bethany has done the same. We see other. So when you are in charge, right? That's the goal. Like, I would assume like we would probably both be doing that too at some point.
Oh, hell yes.
I'm not going to go drive to now, unless I bought another house that was only used for studio office purposes. That's quite different. But I'm not. Listen, I want you to come to me at most of the time because I want it to work around me. That's the reason why I'm doing this. Right?
Yeah, I
Isn't
mean,
that why we're kind of doing this too? Is to have a little bit of like, come to me.
yes, absolutely. That's part of it is you are the brand. Paris is the brand. And that's why she has things like 29 fragrances. Like, my God, I can't think of 29 things I like the smell of enough to come up with 29 fragrances to approve. Mm-hmm.
And staying on top of all those SKUs and knowing what everything is and where it's being sold and what's going, what we discontinue, what we don't, what we need to add. Like the moment where she's having this skincare consultation meeting with her team, and she's like, "There's not a good enough tech neck cream. Tech neck."
Mm-hmm. As I'm looking. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing.
You didn't?
Also, we find out she's really into like science and technology and the metaverse and cloning.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that's been fascinating to learn about her. But, you know, we get to the end and it's starting to kind of set in with her. She's had Phoenix for 6 months at this point. There's a moment where she decides, you know, should we tell my mom that, you know, London's in the works, or do we keep it a secret again? And they decide to flip a coin. And ultimately, we get to the end where we kind of started at the beginning of the season. And oh my gosh, she had me a little anxious because I didn't know. Maybe they filmed this closer to like more recently and then clipped it in, because I was like, when she was like, I'll be right back. And then she gets again the Chanel bag, and Kathy is, well, let's rewind a little bit. She sits Kathy down and Kathy's already like, what's going on? What are we doing?
What next?
Yeah. And then Paris is like, I have a surprise for you. Be right. I'm gonna be right back. And then she skips out and she can you tell I've been practicing for a long time? And she's like, comes back in and she's got this Chanel bag again. And Kathy's just like, the fuck with the Chanel bags and the babies every time? What is going on?
I am so sorry. I was not expecting you to sound that much like her. And so I was like,
hey everyone, it's Paris Hilton and you're listening to iHeartRadio. No, I've literally been practicing since I was like 16. And no, so she gives her mom a pink, big, ginormous Chanel bag, which again, stunning.
yeah.
But then she's like, again, I'll be right back. And then goes and then comes back in. And now I'm really concerned because I'm like, there's a pink blanket on her. There's definitely something under there that's not just an object. Something's moving. So I'm like, wow, you're going to do this to her again? Like, this is not funny anymore. And poor Kathy started literally did you see when she left the room? She was like flipping out, crying. She was, I can't believe you guys are doing this to me.
An anxiety attack at this point.
I don't want to butcher this name. Is it Memoir? Hi, everyone. First time here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so we find out that Carter was able to take Diamond Baby's stem cells and essentially clone them into Diamond and Baby. So that was the surprise that she unveiled to Kathy, and which obviously made Kathy very happy that it probably was not another baby.
It was like it was tears of relief and happiness, but more so overwhelmingly relief.
1000%. Also, she's probably having a fit with the producers. Like, you guys, I've had enough of this on Beverly Hills being set up and being sat down.
Take down Peacock. I'm going to take down NBC.
So I was just
someone
like,
with a phone camera down here, and
yeah,
she had to get a new pair of glasses because she broke them, I'm sure.
So we find out that Paris has ultimately decided that although she loves her mom and they are in a much better space, she is going to keep it a surprise for London. And it seems that Kathy's okay with that because ultimately Kathy just wants Paris to be happy. And I think she's understanding that at least a little heads up that a surprise is coming is better than not knowing that there's
Right.
something going to be coming down the pipeline. And then we also get more of Paris interacting with her son. They have a therapy session. Paris has a therapy session and she discusses the trauma, and the therapist brings up some very valid points of, that voice in your head that's distracting you from being happy in the moment will turn that into the power and that you have in the situation, that you are in charge of all of this. This is a safe house. You would
Mhm.
never let that happen. So that was the mind shift that I think Paris needed, because I think up until that point she's so used to having her inner voice
Yeah.
mess with her. I would call that the imposter syndrome, because we all deal with it some more than others. But this was something that was like, so crystal clear. And it really did seem to click with Paris this time, where it was like, oh, and then the point where she was like, "You've given your authority away to Gina." And she's like, "I have? Yes, you're
Mhm.
his mother. So if it's too warm in there, then you
And you.
say it's too warm in here." Like, no disrespect to Gina and her
No,
expertise. But at the end of the day, she's just there to support you, not
that's
be
it.
the rule maker and not be the one to say this is how it needs to be. So that was nice. And then they finally have one together. And it seemed like Kathy also enjoyed it more than I thought she would. Because,
Yeah.
also, not just Kathy, an older generation typically doesn't look at therapy as something useful. They look at it
Right.
as like, I'm not telling a stranger my business so they can judge me. And at a
Mhm.
level of Kathy and Paris, I understand why they don't trust
Yeah,
therapists, because then before you
totally.
know it, someone's writing a tell all and leaking all their secrets.
Right.
So this lady has done her rounds on some TV shows before. So
Mhm.
clearly she's a safe space and she probably signed some NDAs, but she was able to kind of turn that corner for both of them, I think.
Mhm.
And now I feel like they can actually just start to be on better terms. They can spend more time together. Obviously, they did the pool day where they were showing Phoenix, his first time in
Swimming,
the
yeah.
pool, learning how to swim. So all these great things came out of what seemed to be a lot of anxiety and trauma that was pushed literally under the rug for so long, that it seemed like by the end of this season, the very last episode, Paris was in a completely different mindset and space, and she was ready to take charge of her household and not rely so much on the I don't know, the team or the people that she's hired to essentially kind of keep her in line, which was nice to see. So I would say, if I was going to rate the season out of 10, I would say it's, for me, a 9 out of 10. And I'm not even just doing that because I'm a big Paris fan, because I'll say I was not expecting her to be this raw. I
Open,
thought we
yeah.
would focus more on the ventures and the lighter stuff, maybe dive into the Provo Canyon story that we already know about. But I was certainly not prepared for Kathy to be vulnerable about some things and for her to, have these real conversations. I've also never seen Nikki Hilton cry before.
No, and, I just wanna add something about how Paris had mentioned she was having these intrusive thoughts with, Phoenix. That is not normalized enough for new parents. That is something that there is, especially if you've experienced trauma in your life, that whenever you are first holding this tiny being that you would do anything to protect them, to make them happy, to keep them safe, to make sure nothing in this world even touches them unless it is perfect, it triggers your mind to think of every bad thing that could possibly happen, and then your mind, sometimes it takes over in a way that you're like, "Wait, I'm in control here, but I'm not." Anyone listening, I want to normalize the fact that there are intrusive thoughts, and the best thing to do with those is to literally let the thought, don't try and stop yourself the second it happens, let the thought go through and just let it pass on by. Just let it float by like a cloud and be done with it. Move on to the next thing, because the more you fight it, the harder it is. And that was really good for her to go ahead and acknowledge that, because that's something that's overwhelmingly shameful to feel, that like when you're holding your child, you're not thinking perfect, happy, bubblegum, rainbows, butterflies, because that's all you want to be thinking. And it's because
Mhm.
that's what you want. Those other things force their way in. So I just want to very much, I don't hear enough people normalize that. And I really appreciated that that was really brought in there. And I do agree that she came full circle towards the end, because at first I was going to say she seemed calmer, but that wasn't it. She had trust
Yeah.
within herself. And that is something that, listen, becoming a parent can really change. At first, you do not trust yourself whatsoever. You're like, can I even keep a goldfish alive? How have I kept me alive? And then suddenly you're like, okay, I've kept them alive for one day. All right, we're okay. No, you know, irreversible harm's been done day two. All right, fantastic. And then suddenly you're like, okay, I can do this. And there's a different type of confidence and just like I said, trust, and that you have that comes with that. And we really saw her come into her own with that. Uh, which also, I'm sure you saw that on Instagram, she posted the onesie.
Mhm.
And so I assume, do you think then they must have told Kathy when?
W Well, I mean, at the very end of the season, we find out that London was born on this day, and so we obviously know she unveiled London to her family at Thanksgiving, but I think the heads up that something else was coming down the pipeline
Was there?
sufficed,
Mm-hmm.
because then they can say, "That's Paris."
Right.
That's kinda how Kathy kinda writes it off. That's Paris," like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do?" So I think that was the happy medium at the end for Paris. She's still able to retain that power and
Yeah.
control over her own situation, but still not make her mom feel like an outsider.
Right.
Balance. But,
Mm-hmm.
overall, I think that if anyone is dealing with trauma or experiences intrusive thoughts or is in a situation where they feel swallowed, please watch the series, or the season rather. Um, and read her book, because I'll tell you, it it helps tremendously hearing someone, not that you're glad someone else went through that, because let's be
No.
honest, that's not what it's about. But there's a sense of, I feel seen, I feel heard, that is healing on some level. I can speak from my own experience that she's helped me through a ton of things, whether she may not ever realize that, and that's okay. But like, this really kind of like put things in perspective for me in my
Mm-hmm.
own like journey in life, and what I'm not looking at and what I'm deflecting from. I'm looking for what my ticks are in those
Mm-hmm.
moments and where I could be better.
Oh my gosh.
But
Yeah.
wow, the chat is in here now.
And I hope this inspires people to go ahead and seek out talk therapy, because now it's not always easy to get it on the first therapist. It's kind of like
No.
dating around. You got to find the right one. So, oh, hi, Danielle. So yeah, you give it some time and be sure not to like just throw it away just because maybe the first person or the first few sessions didn't work out, because I think maybe a lot of people realized there are things in their own lives that have been a deterrent in being a happier and healthier person. And that's um, something that would be good to work on. Just work through your stuff, people. Go to therapy.
No, it's investing in yourself is what I've learned. It's not about fixing something. It's investing back into yourself. Sometimes we
Yeah,
pour so much into other people, um, that we forget about ourselves. I mean, it's so
totally.
simple, right? We get on a flight and they tell you, "Put your mask on." Everyone says this, but it's so
Yeah.
true. Help
Yes,
yourself before you try to help someone else, because if you're not good, you're not a help to anyone.
it's
And
true.
that really is the truth. It's easier said than done. I get it. We live in a reality that doesn't always give us
Hmm.
grace, right? You don't know what's coming around the bend until it's there. And then you're like, okay, what now? How can we deal with this one? but it's about how you power through it and giving yourself grace, which we're not always good at doing, right? I know we've
No.
had this conversation many a times.
Many.
We give advice to other people and it's a total Mary Cosby situation. We are like, no, Caitlin, you don't do that. Don't speak about yourself that way. But then I'll get off the phone with you and then I'm looking in the mirror. I'm like, you piece of garbage. You were not this, you were not that. No, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's essentially that. And so, you know, I feel like it is bigger than Paris Hilton. This is just like a way in or a way to open up dialogue, in my opinion, about trauma. I think people are ashamed to talk about trauma that happened to them a long time ago. I think a lot of people feel like there's a lot of victim blaming because at a certain point there was and still is, unfortunately. But the truth is, everyone's human and everyone deals with similar things, and trauma
Mhm.
affects people differently.
Mhm.
So, I think it's important to have that open dialogue. So, if everyone is interested, you should absolutely, if you haven't already, you should read her memoir. So please go do that. And if you haven't streamed Paris in Love season 2 on Peacock, the whole season is out. That
Oh.
is the best gift ever for someone like me or Caitlin. I wish the Housewives would give us a heads up and give us the entire season. That will probably never happen. I'm just saying we'd be on here all day if we had to recap Beverly Hills in one shot. How the hell would we even do that? It would be like a 6-hour
It would.
live.
It would be 6 hours. No one would pee, no one would eat, no one would drink. We would be just talking nonstop until our
Oh my
jaws fell off.
gosh. So much to unpack. But I have kept Caitlin on for a lot longer than I initially asked her to be on. So I do appreciate you hanging in there with me. I was
Of
not
course.
anticipating on how this would go, recapping an entire season. But
You do it for
um,
me all the time. Are you kidding me? This
well,
man
you're
has sat
known
with
for
me for
doing
so
more
long.
in depth. This is like my Besties by Bravo recap because you take this amount of time to do a normal episode, and I have to take this long to do a whole season because it's like I'm
Mhm.
used to just covering like the highlights and just adding some funny commentary. But I wanted to treat this a little bit differently because there was some real stuff
Mhm.
in this that I think was really important to discuss. And I'm really appreciative. And thanks to everyone in the chat that showed up. And I think one of you just came out of anesthesia. Let me
Oh
pull
my
you up.
gosh.
Yes, Memoir, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this. Yeah, thank you for
Oh my
joining this
gosh.
live. I hope this kind of gets you out of that loopy phase.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel speedy healing.
And I'm more than happy, guys, if you do want me to cover or recap the
Mm.
memoir, I would love to do that. This is my second passion outside of reality TV Housewives, and it is Housewives adjacent because we have Kathy Hilton. So it's not a problem. I'm more than happy to do so. So might be, I don't know. See how we work that out. It's a pretty lengthy book. So I don't know if I can do that all in one podcast episode. But
Mhm.
Caitlin, let everyone know where they can find you.
Oh, yes. Follow on Instagram. It's at Besties by Caitlin, Caitlin. And on TikTok, it's Besties by Bravo. I have the Besties by Bravo podcast and Besties by Bravo on YouTube. Giorgio joins me weekly on Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're used to doing this whole thing together. We're the Kathy Lee and Hoda of Bravo
Oh, yeah.
commentators. At least we believe we are. Um,
Where is the Today Show? They need to give us what hour is available? Can they give us the 1 o'clock? I don't even
totally.
care. I would totally do a 1 o'clock.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. You're allowed to have like a little glass of wine then too. So we'd be like ladies who lunch hour. You know what I mean?
A little toasted.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having
Well,
me, Giorgio.
of course, anytime. And listen, guys, I will let you guys know how I decide to recap the memoir book. I definitely think that's a great idea. So thank you
Mhm.
for asking, Aaron. And until the next oh, wait, before I go, I want to remind you guys a new Creating the Creator podcast dropped today with
Mm.
Jess Rothschild from Hot Takes and Deep Dives and the podcast Finding Fire Island. So please go and check that out on Spotify. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for everyone who joined. Thanks for all the love and the support. Thank you to Caitlin. And until the next
Thank you.
episode, guys, I will talk to you on the next one. Bye.